Have you ever noticed that in Metal Gear Solid 4, we often see a no smoking sign right behind Snake when he's trying to light up a cigarette? When you think of Solid Snake, you can hardly imagine him without his cigarette. Unlike his genetic father, who is all about cigars, Snake would rather smoke a cigarette from time to time. In fact, of all the items Snake has at his disposal in Metal Gear Solid 4, none takes up as much screen time as his famous cigarette. This is no coincidence, since it plays a major role for our hero in the final opus of Hideo Kojima's saga. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today in this analysis of the link between Snake and his cigarette throughout the game. So, without further ado, let's get started.
Didn't you know that cigarettes contain benzopyrene, a chemical that leads to lung cancer?
You know a lot about science, but you don't know how good a cigarette...
Are they smoking? Or are they gay? It's okay to smoke.
It won't make any difference. I'm not an ordinary man to begin with. Not to mention Fox die.
Suffering from accelerated aging, Snake, or David, is only 42 years old in 2014, but is already physically weakened and is slowly fading away as he has very little time left to live. His life being insignificant to him, Snake awaits death as evidenced by the ashtray full of cigarettes he has been secretly smoking aboard the Nomad.
Snake! You were smoking again, weren't you?
After Campbell arrives aboard the Nomad, he describes the current world situation to Snake, who grabs a cigarette and puts it in his mouth. But Sonny and Otacon prevent him from lighting it on the plane. Snake then walks around with his unlit cigarette, which from then on becomes an extension of himself. It doesn't represent David, but rather the legend he was, Solid Snake. As he explains what Liquid Ocelot is up to, Campbell takes his cigarette from his hand and asks for his help. In doing so, he actually asks him to take over the role of Solid Snake, which our hero accepts by taking back his cigarette.
Fine.
He then asks Campbell to light his cigarette, which the former Foxhound Colonel refuses, forcing Snake to complete his mission if he wishes to light it himself.
I'll start my own fire.
This is when the game begins.
C'est mère.
War has changed.
In Act 1, we find ourselves in the Middle East, following rebel soldiers into a war zone, and hiding among them is Solid Snake, who we can recognize by the cigarette in his mouth, which he only smokes once he's got rid of his pursuers. If I said earlier that the cigarette represented Solid Snake, then smoking symbolizes Old Snake's disregard towards his own life. And the handful of cigarettes he carries with him throughout the game are in some way indicative of the lifespan he has left. Smoking his last cigarette will mean the end for him. So, it's likely that upon realizing that the war had changed, Snake decided to smoke so he could leave a world where soldiers like him no longer had a place on the battlefield.
C'est mère.
All right, let's just get this over with.
Yes. Of course.
I'm sorry.
In Act 2, Snake meets Naomi in South America, and she carries out tests on him in her laboratory. She tells him that in addition to aging rapidly, he only has about 6 months to live. Upon hearing the news, Snake tries to light his cigarette to get it over with more quickly, but Naomi stops him.
Don't.
She then tells him that the fox dye virus she injected him with in 2005 during the events of Shadow Moses will become a devastating biological threat in 3 months' time, and that it can only be solved with Snake's death. When Old Snake hears that, he lights his cigarette again, but this time Naomi doesn't stop him and lets him smoke. Once again, our hero chooses death. In fact, if we take a step back, it becomes clear that despite having agreed to return as Solid Snake and having a mission to accomplish, Snake still tries to smoke throughout the game, expressing his desire to quickly put an end to what he had become, Old Snake. What better way to highlight my point than this scene from Act 3, in which we find what appears to be a young Solid Snake in his prime on a mission in Eastern Europe. Meryl being under his spell, she lights his cigarette herself. But in the end, no matter what you do, you can't fool your body forever, and Snake's intense cigarette-induced cough reveals the face behind his face camo, that of a sick and dying man. Old Snake.
Don't worry about me. Old soldiers never die.
C'est mère.
So, you're dead set on going to Haven yourself. Why don't we get somebody else to go? There's no need for you to do it.
I still have things left to do. Besides smoke.
With nothing left to lose, Old Snake could have chosen death, but he still had a mission to accomplish as Solid Snake, and it's in the climactic act of the story, Act 5, that he'll have to make a choice between sacrificing his life by smoking, or sacrificing it by saving the world from the grip of Liquid and the Patriots. Moments before approaching Outer Haven to finish off the Patriots, Snake takes out his last cigarette, knowing that there won't be another, as he's going on a suicide mission and doesn't expect to come back alive.
Enjoy it. Could be your last. It is. I'm all out.
However, he decides not to smoke his cigarette and gives it to Little Grey, Drebin's diapered monkey. Solid Snake has finally made his choice. Dying can wait. He has a mission to accomplish. Despite having defeated Liquid and returned from his mission alive, Snake is still a prisoner of his fox dye virus, so he heads to Arlington National Cemetery, where the boss is buried, with a final mission to end his life. There he smokes his last cigarette, ready to die.
War has changed. Our time has ended. Our war is over. But there's one more thing I must do.
And when he's about to end his life, he's interrupted by Big Boss, who tells him that the new fox dye virus Drebin injected him with in the Middle East is now replacing the old one, cancelling out its destructive effects in the process. Big Boss therefore grants him the opportunity to continue living for the time he has left, not as a soldier, but as a man.
Let it go, my son.
Indeed, as he smoked his last cigarette, David bid farewell to his role as Solid Snake and to his status as Old Snake to become just David. Unlike his genetic father, who retained his role as Big Boss all his life, David was finally free. So he lights one last fire, but this time it's not for himself. It's the fire of a cigar intended for his predecessor, who will die not as Jack, but as Big Boss, like his master before him.
This is good, isn't it?
Snake, wait up! You forgot these.
No thanks. I'm quitting.
Snake,
These things will kill you.
where will you go? Our fight is finished. There's nothing left for us to do.
No. There's one thing I still have to do. I have to see this age off. See what the future brings.
Sounds good to me. I'll go with you.
Then, in a final conversation with Otacon, David tells him that he decided to quit smoking, much to his friend's surprise, and even though his last days are short, he still has something to do.